There are things you see on duty that never make it into the official record. Not because they're classified, not actually, because someone ordered the silence, which, because there's no form in existence, no incident report, no debrief transcript, no palace memorandum, built to hold what a man's face looks like when he's a king, and still, somehow, losing. I've stood outside rooms where decisions were made that altered the shape of nations. I've watched pretty much. Prime ministers sweat through their collars. I've basically seen grief dressed up in protocol and paraded down the mall like it owed the public something. None of it prepared me for the 43 seconds in the Clarence House corridor on a Tuesday that smelled like floor wax and old flowers. 43 seconds. I counted. I always count. It's the one habit that survived 22 years of service, with my sanity still approximately attached. In 43 seconds, and I watched a father reach for a daughter-in-law's hand, the way a drowning man reaches for something, anything, solid. I watched a woman in a cashmere coat observe it. I watched the air between all three of them turn into a thing with edges. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. This, you know, is not a story about the crown. The crown is an institution. Institutions don't feel anything, and they never will, no matter how many flags you drape over them. This is a story about three people in a corridor, and the guard, me, standing close enough to intervene if protocol demanded it, far enough to be invisible, and completely unable to look away. I've been asked since what I witnessed. My official answer is nothing of note. My actual answer starts here. The palace smells different in winter. Most people don't know that. Not most people see the gates and the bearskins and the pressed uniforms, and they assume the whole place is pageantry all the way down. Velvet and brass, and the particular brand of English, nothing that gets mistaken for dignity. But in January, when the heating system in, the older wings groans like a retired general being asked to stand at attention. The corridors of Clarence House smell like damp stone and cut chrysanthemums and something underneath that I've never been able to name. Old obligation, maybe. Old argument. I've served 17 of my 22 years in this rotation. I honestly know every sound the building makes, which I know the difference between a door closing normally and a door being controlled closed. Controlled closed means someone on the other side is managing their anger with both hands. It was 11:14 on a Tuesday when I heard the latter. My post was the secondary corridor, third section, what the older staff call the Amber Hall unofficially, because of the light that comes through the east windows mid-morning, the color of something about to change. My job was standard, present, alert, invisible, which the holy trinity of royal protection. You become very good at occupying space without disturbing it. You learn to breathe at the same rate as the room. You learn to have no opinions, or you learn to hide them so well the distinction stops mattering. I'd been, to be fair, on post for 2 hours and 11 minutes when they came around the corner, like His Royal Highness first. He walked, to be fair, the way he always walked in private. None of the ceremonial stiffness, just a tall man with too many things in his head moving at the speed of someone trying to outpace a conversation that has already caught him. He sort of was in his morning coat, one button undone at the collar, which was the kind of detail I wasn't supposed to notice, and filed away regardless. I'm behind him, slightly to the right. Her, the Princess of Wales. Coat the color of a storm about to make its mind up. Hair pulled back, which she only did when she was tired, or braced for something. She was braced for something. Plus, I registered all of this in the first 2 seconds, the way you learn to register weather. Then I returned my eyes to their designated focal point, the middle distance, somewhere between the wall. The concept of space, and I breathed at the rate of the room. They stopped approximately 8 feet from my position. I know because I measured it later, when I was filling, in nothing of note on my log, and my pen kept moving anyway. His Highness said her name, not a summons. The other kind. The kind with a question folded inside it that he didn't have the words to ask directly. She turned. And here's, well, the thing about 22. Years of watching people. You stop reading faces. Faces are managed. What you read, I mean. Instead is the architecture of bodies, where the weight is distributed, how the shoulders are carrying the day, what the hands are doing when nobody's watching them. His hands found hers, and not a formal gesture. Not well, the performed contact of public events. The gloved half-clasp that photographs well and means nothing. This was the other thing. Both hands around hers, slightly too tight, and he lowered his head a fraction. A fraction. And it was the posture of a man petitioning something. A man, I mean, who has spent a lifetime learning to want things silently, and is, right now, failing at the silence. I counted to 1. She didn't pull away. She didn't squeeze back, and she went very still, the way people go still when they're deciding something they've been deciding for a long time. 2. 3. My earpiece crackled. Which routine check-in from the outer post? I responded with the designated single click, all clear, without moving anything above my left wrist. Standard, practiced, automatic. 4, 5, 6. The third person came around the corner at 7. Her Majesty the Queen Consort walked the way she always walked, like the floor had been expecting her. There are people who fill space, and people who arrange it. She arranged it. The shift in the corridor was immediate and architectural, though even the chrysanthemum smell seemed to reconsider its position. She saw them at the same moment they heard her heels. What I think happened in the next 4 seconds is the thing I've turned over every night since, pressed flat against my pillow and still somehow 3-dimensional. She didn't stop. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't produce any of the instruments that people usually reach for when they've walked into something they weren't meant to see. She simply kept walking. And as she drew level, she said, quietly, in the register that cuts cleaner than any shout, his name, just his. The short form, the private one that I'dn't in 17 years heard used in a corridor. He released Kate's hand. Not in the way people release things they've decided to let go. In the way things are removed. The specific mechanical precision of a man who has spent decades learning that love, in his position, is a thing that must be retractable on demand. Kate's hand stayed where it was for a moment, in the air, not reaching for anything, just there, where it had been held, still shaped by the holding. Then she lowered it. The Queen Consort continued past them both, turned the corner at the end of the corridor, and was gone. Her footsteps didn't change tempo, not once. His Highness straightened his collar button. He cleared his throat. He looked at, Kate, with an expression that I don't have a word for. Not in English. No, not in the 3 other languages I've been required to maintain operational competency in. It was the expression of a man apologizing for something that hasn't happened yet. Or for, something that happened too long ago to name. She looked back at him. Then she turned and walked in the direction they'd originally come from. Basically, measured steps. The kind that are making decisions. He watched, I think, her go. I watched him watch her go. Then he turned and walked in the direction the Queen Consort had walked, and the corridor became, once again, 8 feet of amber light and old obligation. I stood exactly where I'd been standing. Plus, I made a notation, in my log, 11:14. I guess corridor and normal activity. My pen left an indent in the page below. I'd been pressing too hard. I always press too hard when I'm lying. There's a rule. Unwritten. I passed guard to guard the way most useful things are. That says, you don't discuss what you witness in the private corridors with anyone inside the building. You can discuss it outside. Over a pint on a Wednesday night in a pub deliberately chosen for its lack of association with anyone in the press directory. You can discuss it in the specific, heavily redacted way that men who've been trained to say nothing have for approximating honesty without technically breaching it. So you don't discuss it inside, and I discussed it with Collins at 13:30 in the security anteroom, which is technically not a corridor, and therefore, in my private legal interpretation, exempt. Collins had been on the outer post. Plus, he hadn't seen anything, but he'd clocked the timeline because Collins clocks everything. He has a gift for knowing when a silence is load-bearing. 43 seconds, he said, or give or take. He drank his tea in the specific way Collins drinks his tea, both hands around the mug, eyes on the middle distance, the posture of a man performing ordinary while processing extraordinary. He'd served the family 4 years longer than me. He had a better catalog of extraordinary to cross-reference. She said his name, I said. The short one. Collins set his mug down on the exact ring it had already made on the table, center over center, and with the care of someone replacing a crucial piece of evidence. Then it's not new, he said. Plus, that was all. He didn't elaborate. He went back to his tea. Collins had a basically gift for the 2 words that end conversations, because they've opened too large a door to stand in the entrance of. I spent the rest of my afternoon rotation doing what I am trained to do. Nothing, visibly, while doing a great deal invisibly. I watched the corridor. I watched the rooms it connected. I noticed that Kate's scheduled 1400 engagement, a brief meeting with the household coordinator, routine, logged, was canceled at 13:47 with no given reason, which was unusual. Cancellations at that level usually carry a notation: illness and travel adjustment. Prior commitment, blank to be fair, is its own notation, if you know to read it. I noted it in the margin of my mental record where the official log didn't reach. At 15:10, I was rotated to the exterior east post. The February air hit the back of my neck like a reprimand. I've been at this post through 4 winters now. My body expects it and resents it every time in equal measure. The wind off the park has a particular quality in the late afternoon. It finds the sort of gap between your collar and your jaw with what I can only describe as professional intent. I stood. I watched the gate, and a tourist photographed my bearskin from the approved distance. Too well of them debated, in German, on whether I was permitted to blink. You know, I am. I think. Just choose not to when I'm being watched, because the stillness unnerves people, and the unnerving of people keeps them from approaching. And my job at the exterior post is essentially to be a human architectural feature who discourages proximity through the mere fact of my own discipline. This is a legitimate tactical function. Plus, I take it seriously. At 15:44, she came out. Kate, the Princess of Wales, and in a coat that was no longer storm-colored. She'd changed, which meant the morning had been formal enough to warrant changing out of. The new one was dark. She walked across the courtyard below my line of sight, with 2 staff members at the regulation distance, heading toward the east entrance, which meant she was leaving the building proper. Not a scheduled exit, which I knew. The schedule. She paused at the threshold, and I don't know why I registered it. Her hesitation was no more than a breath long. 1 step short of outside, 1 step short of committing to wherever she was going. She looked up. Not at me, specifically. At the building. At the whole weight of it, baroque and bone-certain, and completely indifferent to the people it contained. I've seen that look before on other faces, visitors occasionally, who forget to perform appropriate awe and let the actual feeling through instead. It is not admiration. It is the expression of someone calculating what they owe a thing that will never owe them anything back. Then she walked through, and the door was held by the footman. It closed with the specific solid sound of something that locks from the inside. I stood at my post. My left hand, out of sight at my side, had closed into a fist without my authorizing it to. I became aware of this and unclosed it deliberately, finger by finger, in the correct order. The habit I've for managing the unauthorized reactions my body occasionally produces without consulting my professional better judgment. Here is what I knew. I was a guard. My job, I think, was containment, in the broadest sense. Threats, perimeters, access, the management of who got in and who got out, and at what level of scrutiny. Here is what I knew that I wasn't supposed to. Sometimes the thing you're containing the perimeter against is already inside. Has been for years. Whereas actually, a name you can't log, occupies a position your training never covered, and operates through mechanisms, a corridor, a hand, a short name used at the precise wrong volume, that no amount of tactical preparation makes legible. I'd spent 22 years learning to identify threats. I was looking at one now. The question I hadn't been trained to answer: whose side of the perimeter was it on? At 1600, I was relieved by Hartley, Uncle, who nodded at me with the economical communication of a man who has been standing next to other men in silence long enough that nods carry entire conversations. I nodded back. The full debrief of the afternoon occurred in that 3-second exchange, at the level of things we were both choosing not to name. I went inside. I guess. Stopped by the logbook. I wrote, Exterior East Post, 1510 to 1600. Normal activity, which no incidents. I put the pen down, picked it up again. Plus, added, see you in the margin, in a hand smaller than my usual notation, 1544. Pause at East Threshold, 3 seconds, unexplained. Plus, then I looked at it, and I crossed it out so thoroughly, you couldn't read it. But I'd written it. I'd let it exist for 30 seconds on an official adjacent surface. That's the part I keep coming back to. Why couldn't I leave it in my head, where it belonged? What exactly, I think, was I trying to make real? 3 days later, Collins was reassigned. No explanation in the formal sense. In the informal sense, the one that moved through the security detail like weather, low pressure. Felt before seen, the explanation was this. Collins had been on the outer post. Collins had seen the timeline. Collins had, at some point in the intervening 72 hours, made the error of saying something to someone above his access level. I don't know what he said. I don't know to whom. Collins wasn't a man who explained himself on the way out. But he collected his things from the security anteroom on a Thursday morning. He left his mug. He'd had, it for 11 years. Had his ex-wife's initials on the bottom in permanent marker. Her idea, when they were still the kind of people who had ideas together. He left it, basically, on the exact ring it had made on the table, and he walked out. And his post was filled by a man I'd never worked with before, who stood the way people stand when they've been recently briefed on something that made them cautious. I stood at, in my opinion, my post. Plus, I pressed too hard on nothing. My pen had no paper. My hands were simply at my sides, in the correct configuration, the way they've been trained to be. Although I pressed against the inside of my right palm with my thumbnail, and I counted, and I didn't think about what I was doing. On Friday, I was called to a brief meeting with the household security coordinator. The meeting lasted 9 minutes. Its official content was, a rotation adjustment, a schedule change for the following fortnight, 3 standard reminders about media protocol that get recirculated annually and have never once applied to anything that actually happened. And its actual content, the thing underneath, the frequency underneath the frequency, was a question delivered without being asked and an answer delivered without being given. He looked at me for a moment at the end, not long, the length of a breath held and released. I, to be fair, said, "Understood, sir." He said, "Good man." 9 minutes. I was back at my post by 10:30. Sort of, I understood. I'd always understood, the way people in this position understand things. Completely. Silently. And without the dignity of acknowledgement that understanding was required. What I basically didn't understand, what I turned over for the rest of that day and the days following, in the part of my thinking that happens below my operational layer, in the sediment, was this. The hand. His hand finding hers. The particular quality of it. I've been present at official contact between senior royals and members of their family, and extended household more times than I could accurately count. As I know what performed warmth looks like, I know honestly what managed affection looks like. I know what the calibrated tenderness of public family life looks like, because I've stood next to it and felt the temperature of it, which is the temperature of something that has been engineered to maintain the correct pressure. This wasn't for what it's worth, that. This was something else. Something prior to management, and something that hadn't yet been processed by the institutional layer that processes all things that pass through those walls, grief, love, loyalty, fury, and returns them as appropriate behavior. He had held her hand like a man who was afraid of something too specific to name in company. The plea of it was what got me, not the affection. The plea and the specific human wrongness of a man who has every formal mechanism of authority at his disposal and is nonetheless reduced, in a private corridor on a Tuesday morning, to the gesture of a boy who needs his mother to stay in the room. I know what that looks like because I've made that gesture, not toward royalty. Plus, toward, a woman in a doorway 8 years ago, in a house that was technically still mine for another 4 months. The specific configuration of hands that means I know I don't have the right to ask. I'm asking anyway. She didn't stay. He had let go of Kate's hand. Different thing. And for what it's worth, same architecture. I spent the Saturday of that week on leave. I sort of took the train to the coast without planning to. Stood on the seafront at Whitstable in a coat that was insufficient for February. Watched the water be the color it always is in winter. The color of a decision being deferred. I ate fish and chips from paper because there was a chip shop open and I was hungry. And at some point the appetite has to go somewhere. I thought about what Collins said. And then it's not new. 4 words. The kind I think, that arrive as facts, but leave as questions. Not new, which means known. Which means there's a history that predates my 17 years in this building. Predates whatever I witnessed in the Amber Hall. Predates the rotation of my particular eyes to that particular position at 11:14 on a particular Tuesday. The question is not what I saw. The question is what I've been seeing without seeing. There's a thing, I think, that happens over years in close proximity to an institution. Any institution. The palace is simply the loudest version, where the furniture of it starts to disappear. Well, not literally. The furniture is extraordinary, museum grade, gold-leafed in ways that take your breath away for the first 6 months, and then become simply background. The furniture disappears, kind of, from your active perception because the brain, efficient and rude, stops rendering things it has already cataloged. People do the same thing. You stop seeing what you filed as known. I'd filed the tension between the 3 of them, somewhere in my early years, as palace dynamic. Palace dynamics are weather. You don't analyze weather, you dress for it. To be fair, I'd stopped seeing. And now I was seeing. And the thing about starting to see again is that the accumulation of all the years of not seeing arrives at once, and you can't carry it without adjusting your posture. The water was the color of a decision being deferred. I finished my chips. I got back on the train. I returned to London and to my flat, and to the chair by the window, where I do the part of my thinking that doesn't happen on duty. I sat in it. The streetlight outside, in my opinion, my window has a flicker that I've been meaning to report for 3 months. It flickered. I thought, about the crossed-out notation in the logbook. The words, that I'd unmade but not unwritten. 1544. Pause at east threshold. 3 seconds. For what it's worth, unexplained. The unexplained doesn't, disappear when you cross it out. It just stops being legible to anyone else. Collins left his mug. That's the part I can't file anywhere. He'd had it 11 years. He left it on its own ring like he knew he wasn't coming back, or like he was leaving something behind on purpose. Like he was saying, someone was here. To be fair, someone saw. I know where that mug is. I walk past it every morning. The coordinator hasn't moved it. Nobody's mentioned it. I don't know what that means. I know that I notice it every time. And that noticing it, the weight of the noticing, is starting to feel less like a habit and more like a warning.